Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's lunch lecture. We have our three instructors for the JumpStart program. So some of you know them already, and then TeenArch, you will be meeting them for the first time today. First up, we have Khurshid Naderi Azad. She's the CEO and co-founder of Wally Wool, a reimagined 38-year-old company that unites architecture and custom interior manufacturing. She's a licensed architect in California and an adjunct professor in the Master of Architecture program at the University of British Columbia. Khurshid holds a Master of Architecture with distinction from the Harvard Graduate School of Design and a BS in Architecture from McGill University. Her work focuses on spectacle, contemporary culture, and exact forms.
So a villain origin story is a story that narrates how a character or a person becomes a villain. And it's about something that happened in the past, like a past event that determines all of the decisions that that person makes and all the things that they do. For me, my villain origin story was my Master of Architecture thesis. And the final review is here on May 15th or 16th of 2019. This project and final review set the course for all of my architectural interests that came after. And you'll recognize some familiar faces. There's Mariana Banyas, who's the chair of this program, and she lectured here a couple of weeks ago for you guys. There's Max Quill, who also teaches here. In pink is Neil Denari, the GOAT, who also teaches here and is going to present to you guys in a couple of weeks. Then there's Jennifer Bonner, who was my thesis advisor in the glasses, in the yellow glasses. And we've looked at a lot of her drawings in the JumpStart presentation so far. And in the back is Andrew Holder, who is the business partner of Ben Fryinger, who did a lecture here also in the last lunch lecture series. So I'm Khurshid. My name means the sun in Farsi, and I'm a registered architect in California. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wally Wool, and I'm also an adjunct professor at UBC in Vancouver. And my interests are set on three pillars. One is contemporary spectacle, two is inexact forms, and three is inexact programs. So the first, contemporary spectacle, is based on this theory that I've made up called the real spectacle framework. And it is based on how every type of spectacle has three phases. The anatomy is three phases: pre-production, production, and post-production. And I argue that in our contemporary time, in the present times, spectacle is weighted equally among those three phases. So it's just as important to pay attention to pre-production and post-production as it is to production, the final product. My second interest, inexact forms, uses this word inexact, which is a word that means something that is essentially rather than accidentally inexact. And I'm interested in forms like geometries and shapes that are inexact, that are purposefully inexact, and specifically a set of forms that I call faux cardioids that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. In terms of inexact program, I'm interested in programs that are a hyphenate program, and specifically what I call theater slashies. So theater slash hotels, theater slash factory, theater slash whatever. So these are all examples of theater slash hotels. So these are hotels that are inside of stadia in Munich and North America. And I'm going to share a series of projects with you guys. And on the top right-hand corner, you'll always be able to track which one of the three interests are included in the project. So first, spectacle; second, inexact form; third, inexact program. So the first project is called the Glossary of Faux Cardioids. So this project was really inspired by the fact that all of my work, which usually features curvilinear form, was always described by the vaguest, strangest words in reviews, whereas people that were using Platonic geometry or rectilinear geometry were being really described really precisely. So I was really frustrated with with forms that include curves not being taken as seriously in discourse. So I became interested in a series of forms that are inspired by an exact geometry that's called a cardioid. So a cardioid is a type of epicycloid that it has a singular cusp, and a cusp is a point at which two branches of a curve meet such that the tangents of each of the branches are equal. So it looks like a heart on its side, which is why it's called a cardioid. So this is what I'm interested in, curves that have like a single little dimple. So I made a series of forms that I call faux cardioids because they're not exact, they're inexact. And I presented them in the form of a feast and presented the single cusp condition in various scales in various ways. So this will be very familiar to the JumpStart students, actually, because for the last week, they've been producing forms and trying to perform specific series of operations to make them. So for me, I made these forms. I invented them. I made up histories for them. I made up names for them. And I used subdivision modeling, which is a little bit different than what you all have been using. You've all been using NURBS modeling. So it's a little bit different, but you will still be able to, at the bottom right, see all of the operations that were used to create each of these forms. And in my research in the history of geometry to find out how things were named and how discourse was first built around geometry, I learned that for most of the shapes as they were invented, the names that were given to them were based on what object or thing in nature resembles that form. So I used the same methodology to name my forms. So this is a muscus. It's from the Latin musculus, from muscle, and eidos, which is all of them are going to, I mean, we're going to talk about eidos is going to be the suffix for all of the names, and it comes from shape. And it's a filleted disc with a pursed, engorged central rim. This is a quinsoid because it looks like a quince, and it's an inflated and waxed cardioid knifed with a single cusp outward, making several ridges. And quince is a fruit. And I made families for them. So this is from the family Poma, from the same family as licorice. It looks like lychee. So it's a bent torus flattened around the pit. And you can see all of the operations that were used. The crescimol looks like a croissant, which comes from the same form. And it is a tapered and bent capsule with a single mole. So all of these have a single cusp, which is why I call them faux cardioids. A bundoid looks like a bun cake. And the bun cake is also from a German root, tied together. And eidos, again, the suffix for form. A bulged orb with an indented bunt center belted by a spooned ring. Escaloid comes from escallop, a filleted cube with a circular cap, and square perimeter. So all of these were produced and they were arranged as a feast on a table. They relate to each other in various ways. And also on the table was ways that I demonstrated how the single cusp can be used at other scales, like at the scale, like in a facade, at the scale of a railing meeting a wall, at the scale of aperture. And also how we can look at site models and site conditions also in inexact ways. So you see the cusp happening at the scale of a facade, at the scale of furniture, and at the scale of massing. The next project is called the Jiggly, Chewable, Hardly Reducible Sanjas of Ball Hall. So this is my thesis project. This was my villain origin story. The previous project was a thesis prep project. So it laid the groundwork for this project. So this project was you guessed it, a theater hotel. And it is in the form of an echinoid, which was another one of my made-up forms. And echinus is the root for sea urchin because it looks like a sea urchin. And this is a theater hotel in Cupertino, California, across from the Apple headquarters, which is a perfectly cylindrical building that was designed by Foster and Partners. So this is in opposition to that because that's a platonic exact geometry, and this is an inexact form. So in this hotel, all of the hotel rooms face a 17-story atrium where there's a 24-hour party, a 24-hour spectacle called a bed ball. So these are the floor plans, typical floor plans. So you see all of the hotel rooms are facing the central atrium, and the beds are at the tip of each hotel suite looking directly at the party. Also visible here is the cusp manifesting in floor plan at various scales. At the most dominant scale, it's registering the VIP suite, which is that best seat in the house, best room in the house, where your bed is literally suspended in the middle of the 24-hour party. This was a fragment model showing 4 units at scale. So it's not 6 units, it's 4, because the unit configuration is similar to the duplex units in Unité d'Habitation by Corbusier. So they have this kind of Tetris-shaped massing that locks into each other. So 4 units all are entered through the middle floor here. You see the opening for a corridor. So you enter each unit, and either, depending on how the massing is configured, you either go down the stairs inside of the unit to the living space downstairs or upstairs, but this is 4 units. And this is the facade condition that also registered, as you can see, the bulbs and the cusps, the single cusp registering a single balcony in each suite. So the bed ball, which is the spectacle that I invented for this building, is a party that you watch from the platform of your bed. So you see here on the right-hand side, somebody, a hotel guest in their bed, watching the party, which is happening in the ballroom. And there's a one-way mirror glass that from the bed side is transparent, and from the ball side is reflective. So from the ball, that's a mirror. From the bed, this is a glass that you can see through. This is inside of the VIP suite. And the dressing rooms and the vanities, so the pre-production space, is all on the facade, on the perimeter of the building facing outward. So it places the pre-production process at the center as the most dominant spectacle that the city actually experiences. That's what you see from the outside, is the performers getting ready for the performance that's in the inside in the atrium. And ultimately, the biggest cusp, the biggest singular cusp is in section. It's an architectural giant scale cusp chandelier that dips down into the atrium. The next project is my architecture podcast. It's called Full Hose, and it's pronounced that way specifically. And if you listen to the first episode, you'll know why. It's on Spotify and on Apple Podcast. It only has 3 episodes. Hopefully it'll have more in the future. But as one of the reviews said, it's a kaleidoscopic audio collage which approaches a subject spatially, building a world around the listener in each episode. So it's a series of storytelling / plus interviews plus audio collages that makes an audio essay about an architectural argument that connects to a current cultural event. So these images are from an MIT blog that documented my process of making this podcast called Whippish, so it's available online. Then it's my practice, Wally Will Total Design Inc. legally. And this is a practice that I own with my husband, Alan. So the company is an architecture / interior manufacturing company. So we do architectural design, and we also manufacture custom soft furnishing. So that's custom build outs, but everything that's covered in fabric, either upholstery, beds, sofas, couches, or window coverings. So you see, this is the space of our factory. It's 10,000 square feet. It's in Vancouver, BC. And all of the production happens there locally from scratch. And the showroom is also attached to the factory. The history of this company, and Juliet was mentioning that it's 38 years old, is that it started from this historic department store, which is something that department stores are a typology that used to exist and are kind of defunct now. But this historic department store in Canada was very much part of the identity of the West Coast. And they used to have many, many departments. That's why it's called a department store. And the drapery department used to employ this couple that works there for a long time. And before the department store went bankrupt in the 90s, the couple spun off into a company called WindowWorks that mainly made window coverings. So Alan and I bought this company that had started in 1987 in 2021. So 4 years ago in July, actually. And we started the process of restructuring an extremely old legacy business that needed upgrading in every way, and also incorporating an architecture practice as a part of it. So here you see the legacy of WW going from the Woodward's logo to the WindowWorks logo to Wally Wool. And you'll be able to recognize the faux cardioid instead of our logo, because I like what I like. I like few things. And also we like our W's curvy and not jagged. And these were images of the showrooms of the 3 versions of the same company. So the Woodward's drapery department in 1910, then our showroom in the same space that we're in now in 1987, and then what it is now when I redesigned everything and we made all of these pieces that I designed in-house. So to say architecturally, what most dramatically affected the business structuring was the slow process of understanding what the floor plan was of the factory and what it needs to be. So this took many, many years of observing what the production is, knowing what we want to do with the company, learning what the culture of the team is and what it should be. So some of the main changes, as I flip back and forth, you'll be able to see, is opening up the upholstery department to be able to do much larger and more complex furniture pieces, as opposed to, you see, you had to make 6 tight turns to get to like the top right-hand corner of the upholstery department. There is the rotating of the drapery table so that it aligns with the very narrow lot. And one of the most interesting changes being the sewing machines, which in the previous iteration, when we took over the factory, lining the 2 walls you see in the top and bottom of the floor plan. This was something that we learned after a while, that the original staff, the staff that was there when we took over the company, half of them couldn't work with one another. So one half would work on one side of the factory and one half on the other. This was all reconciled after we built our own team, and they could collaborate with one another in a central spine with only the machines that are needed in a very specific Tetris shaped, like custom configuration that I'll talk about in a little bit. So I have some before and afters. So the befores are images of the factory the first week that we took it on in July of 2021, and the afters are what it is now. So this is the storefront. This is what it used to be, and this is what it is now. The showroom before, this was the first week, and after. The showroom again before and after. The blinds gallery before and after. The factory before and after. And the upholstery department before and after. These are some of the items that we've made, just as a sample selection. The manufacturing part of the business mainly works for architects and interior designers and film set decorators. I also use the same, my real spectacle framework in how I've structured our business, how I see it, and what I see the value in it. Because local manufacturing is increasingly rare. And I think the spectacle of making, the spectacle of these things being made there in person is the best part of the business. So this is how I look at it. This is how we view it. And this is how we present it to the world, which is the same structure: pre-production, production, post-production, pre-production being backstage, production being stage, and post-production being audience. The red being the props. And this is how we operate in the space. A lot of events are held in our factory. We do a lot of educational tours. We do a lot of art auctions and movie nights and things like that. But also the process of making each piece from beginning to end is documented in these like meticulous short videos that we put on Instagram, because for us, the value of the work is in the process of making, the spectacle of making. So as I said, the legal name of the company is Bollywood Total Design. Total design is a term from architecture history from back in various points in time where architects used to also design the interior and then design custom furniture for it. So that was called total design, and there's a very good article that defines what total design means. So these are projects that we designed ourselves and then we also made. So the ones on the left-hand side of the screen are pieces that we designed for our own space, for the factory and the showroom, and we also built. And then the ones on the right-hand are for paid clients, so a restaurant, pieces for and like I said, it's also like architecture interiors combined with furniture. So sometimes it's all of the above, sometimes it's a couple of them. So for restaurants, for art galleries, for private residences. Some of my favorite pieces are the reception desk that you all saw that has hundreds of tentacles. This is for our own space. The sewing machine, like Tetris-shaped sewing machine tables, which are very specific to drapery production because you have a massive amount of fabric that you have to lay on the left-hand side of every sewing machine. So we have this Tetris-shaped thing that allows for everybody to work in a limited space with maximum functionality. And then the various configuration studies that we did for these modular sofas that we designed and made for an art gallery in Vancouver. So really considering what the sightlines are and what the different configurations are for different types of art shows, etc. And this is our team. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the studio that I teach, Workshop of the Wondrous Whoop-de-Doo. This is a Master of Architecture option studio or advanced topic studio, depending on which school. And it's a 9-credit course that's in the penultimate semester of the Master of Architecture program. And it's 12 weeks long, typically 12 to 14 students. And the brief follows several of the interests that I've discussed so far. Most centrally, the project is a theater slashy, so a theater / other programs, and it's on the site of the Bollywood factory. So the semester starts with them using the real spectacle framework that I've made up to do a site analysis on the manufacturing space of the factory as if it was theater. They do it parallel to doing the same study on actual theater precedents. So this is the same kind of color-coded analysis of the spectacle framework of the Wally factory. And then they work through these structured deliverables. Some of them are again made up, like the diptych, which is a rendered collage accompanied by the identical image, but in annotated format. And then fragment models, study models, the spectacle isometric, which shows the spectacle framework, color-coded, rendered sections and plans, and a live performance. So every single one of our reviews incorporates a live performance that is tied to the conceptual idea behind the project. So I'm going to show you some of my students' work. This PE77 was a theater/genetic testing lab. So this is, all of these are on the side of the factory. And as part of the design, the modular design of the semester, they do the analysis and site analysis in the framework of theater. Then they do a series of very energetic, fast-paced formal studies, and they receive their program, which they have some choice in, but they use the tool path of these specific tools at the factory, like scissors and needles and staple guns, to create these forms. And then once they've done all of that, in the final 4 weeks of the studio, they do a series of revisions and refining of the work, of the plans and sections and drawings, and they populate them with something that I call the whoop-de-doo, which is the ultimate form of their spectacle. It's something they make up. It's the building Super Bowl. It's what they've made this fictional narrative for their building for. So in this case, their whoop-de-doo is a New Year's Eve event where they're looking at genetic testing in a kind of dystopian context. So if we keep going with what 23andMe and other companies might be doing, and we start moving towards genetically engineered people and babies, et cetera, so then they have this event where these tubes in the building eventually at midnight on New Year's Eve during the strange party, drop the new specimen in, for example. So all of these drawings and the models are populated with the whoop-de-doo. So they're not neutral documents. And they do a live performance of a version of the whoop-de-doo at their final review. The Spatial Firearm was a theater/shooting club. This is in Canada, so they wanted to do a gunless shooting range. So what they wanted to explore was how can architecture respond to some of the needs that people have or interests that makes them buy guns or want to use guns, but without ever having to shoot a gun. So it's a spatial firearm. And you see they used video to demonstrate the whoop-de-doo, which in their case was a real event that happened in Canada that related to the topic of guns and gun control. The next project is Dr. Wool and Dr. Winter, which was a theater/surgical suite. So you see on the bottom right, an RCP, a reflective ceiling plan, that shows how the operating room, when the doctors are doing the surgery and the operation, their footprints on the floor, it's on a frosted glass double-layered floor that from the lobby below, you're seeing the footprints move around. So they worked a lot with spectacle in the context of something that still needs to respect privacy of patients, et cetera, et cetera. And the Calyx was a theater/wholesale florist. They were really interested in the consumerist aspect of the wholesale flower industry and its duality with an eco-friendly ecosystem of native plants. And that's what that project was about. So all of these the work that I showed today, I hope will show you guys my 3 interests of spectacle, anexact form, and anexact program as they can manifest in personal research and work during my Master's of Architecture thesis, pedagogy, and professional practice, all keeping consistent with the interest that arrived to me from my villain origin story. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Khurshid. Next up, Emmanuel Osorno is an architect and educator based in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the founder of EOS, a design and research practice that investigates the role of media in shaping perceptions of architecture with a focus on representation, housing affordability, and placemaking. Osorno has held fellowships at Tulane and Northeastern universities and is an inaugural member of the Dean's Equity and Inclusion Initiative. He holds a post-professional Master of Architecture from Princeton University, a Bachelor of Architecture from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and currently he is a visiting assistant professor at the Northeastern School of Architecture. He has practiced professionally in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York, and is a registered architect in California.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the summer program staff for having me and giving us a platform to actually show you some of our work. And thank you to the students for attending. What I'm going to be essentially kind of doing today, I named the talk Beyond Buildings, Architecture as Storytelling. It's essentially kind of like giving you a little bit of the background of what led me to do the type of work I do, explaining a little bit what I mean by architecture and storytelling, show you two projects and a few closing notes just to kind of wrap everything up. So the intro, a little bit about myself. This is kind of my visual CV or trajectory. For many of you who are starting, in these programs, probably find this more or less helpful in the sense that, like, it is a very linear path, right? Like from top to bottom, chronological in many ways, but it's one that took several years, right? Community college, undergraduate. I worked professionally for 6 years at Eric Owen Moss Architects in town. And then decided to make a change. A change is to go to grad school and to be here, right? Be able to teach and show some of the research work that I've been doing. So my career before was this, right? Producing buildings. I had the opportunity to work for Eric Owen Moss for, as I said, 6 years, and essentially build about 10 different projects during this time. So these are some of the, probably highlights. But essentially, things shifted once I began teaching, and I feel that there's a very kind of interesting moment that academia allows us to do, which is to speculate in a different way once, like, I don't have to make money out of the projects that I'm going to present to you. So my practice, EOS, focuses on two interests, housing affordability and placemaking. I'll try to explain what these two things mean by showing you these two projects, essentially kind of like seeing the narrative behind it. And more than anything, right, like the kind of inspiration for me is to move a little bit beyond the idea that our role as architects is simply to design buildings, but we can do a little bit more. So the FAO Housing Project, what is this about? It all begins with this question, right? Like my kind of lack of understanding of what affordable housing actually meant, because it's a very relative term, right? Affordable to who? That's always a question that I had, right? And the reality is that it's a little bit more complex than I thought, right? Like these are just gonna give you numbers for Boston. The median income in Boston is 100,000 a year, so technically everyone that is, making over 50% of that or over 50K a year as a household is essentially part of this kind of like realm of who affordable housing actually targets. 56% of all renters, but we have all these kind of low-income families and extremely low-income families that are below that number, and is especially close to me, as many of my family members have actually suffered from housing insecurity over the years. And there's always that question of like, what happens with the people that need a little bit more assistance, right? So just to kind of paint a little bit of a picture, one out of 3 households in the country rent, and out of those, 1 in 10 receive housing assistance, and 30%, essentially 15 million people, 15 million households qualify for assistance. They're in that kind of deeply affordable low-income bracket, therefore, but they do not have any assistance. So it's a significant amount of people, and that more than anything exacerbates the demand for deeply affordable housing. And what we see is that for every public housing unit that provides, of course, a very kind of subsidized low-rate unit to low-income families, only for each unit, there are 20 qualified renters, right? Like it's a pretty high demand. And if we calculate those numbers, run it through like the need in Boston, figure out that there are like 70,000 units that are still needed, right? This is kind of a big number. Was a little bit surprised and a little paralyzed when I figure out that it is actually this start. The picture is not looking good. So I decided to try to explain or to visualize a little bit what 70,000 units actually looks like. So I look for the longest street in the city that connects actually City Hall with the suburbs. This is Boston, by the way. And the building at this scale to be able to fit 70,000 units, considering that it's a double loaded corridor, 30 feet per unit, will be 9.5 miles long and 22 stories high, right? That is like ridiculous. So, of course, like not very productive. Like we can't really make a wall like this, right? Like in a building like this. So in a way, like I just wanted to find a more decentralized way of kind of targeting the issue. I started looking at like typical parcels and how many of them there are in the city. These are the ones that you can see here. They're all kind of combined, so different lots in the city. And if you put them all together, you see that there's a very kind of typical size that kind of comes out of that and gives you the typology that is common in Boston, which is a triple decker. Triple decker, if you're not familiar, looks very much like this. It's pretty much just an extrusion of the same floor, one unit per floor, usually between 2 or 3 bedrooms per unit. The realization here for me, more than anything, the opportunity that I saw is that a lot of the households that are actually in need of help are single person households. So over 50% of them are. So there is a very large opportunity to kind of like find a new way to kind of intervene within these lots. So for me, it was like, okay, let's do a housing prototype, right? Like as a quick kind of exercise on understanding how we might change the way that we live, so that we can actually achieve a higher density, knowing that we don't need all that space for a single family, right? So in this particular case, I'm thinking about shifting the mode of like, kind of 3 houses and producing actually several amenities. So there's a bit of a negotiation between like a reduced living space, a unit that is significantly smaller, but gaining in the process a lot of collective space for those 6 households to actually come together, and the different configurations that can actually come by just kind of condensing some of the program and some of the utilities within the building. So the way you access is from the side, you go up the stairs, you essentially that feeds up to the different units in the 2nd and the 3rd floor. So the idea is fit 6 households, 6 families, several amenities in there, and still within the same footprint. Essentially what they call gentle densification, right? As I said, it's a prototype. It's more than anything. The big issue with something like this is NIMBYism, right? Building something like this, like in actually kind of convincing someone that this is worth building is actually quite difficult, potentially the most difficult part of doing housing and doing architecture to begin with. So changing these perceptions is actually what got me interested in the work. And what I'm going to present to you is actually like my own kind of Trojan horse approach of how to do this. So what can we do in the face of NIMBYism? That's the question essentially that leads up to the project. So we started with the research, the design, but then there's a kind of influence phase that goes at the end. And the idea here is that when you have this when you face this level of resistance, right? Like talking about people seems very difficult, right? We don't want to, when we're faced with like lowering house prices or a perceived kind of danger in the community, even the most progressive person would kind of oppose a housing project like this. So the idea then is not to talk about people, but to talk and to kind of build sensitivity through a kind of proxy. In this case, the proxy for me became the turkeys. So wild urban turkeys all around Boston. They're quite common. They're disturbing, of course, traffic and streets. They're always in parks, right? Like you can see the turkeys are always in the same area across the different seasons. And more than anything, like the idea of the campaign, essentially a media campaign, is to advocate for housing turkeys through essentially kind of creating turkey coops for them. So the Fowl Housing Project is essentially just a call for people in Boston to install turkey coops in their front yards. That's pretty much it. So some of the ads that kind of come with that, essentially the space necessities that they would need to actually satisfy this requirement. It's a very small 25 square foot space. And the drawings that would accompany that, of course, little turkeys everywhere. And essentially, like this, the idea is that this will be a do-it-yourself kind of process, right? Like you be able to get the instructions, clean up the land, assemble it yourself. You get the kit, right? Like, and you can do this essentially kind of like an IKEA assembly structure, right? And kind of just put it all together. In a way, like the purpose, of course, is to, you know, open up your front lawn, right? Like to species that are in need. And in that process, of course, imbue, I guess, in the residents a little bit of that kind of like, let's help others and be part of a kind of community within by doing that. If you know anything about turkeys, especially wild turkeys, is that they will never roost in a turkey coop. They roost in trees, just like here, right? So the idea is actually a lot different. The coops are not coops precisely in the traditional sense. They're actually meant to be perceptual devices. And this kind of idea of adding sensitivity to people, right? Like one in terms of like helping a bird, but also essentially kind of like creating a device or using the coop as a viewing device that the closer you get to it, the more you can kind of experience it as higher density, occupying the small gaps in between buildings and other things. So in a way, like you're familiarizing yourself slowly. That's the kind of Trojan horse approach, right? Like that the turkey coop itself will, you know, help you kind of visualize a higher density within your neighborhood, and hopefully there be less resistance, right, over time. So whether it's one or three, kind of always facing empty lots within the area. So the campaign is not very popular in this moment. 2 followers on my social media campaign, so I definitely need to hire one of you guys to kind of help me out. But you know, nevertheless, the ideas are what matters. So just a little bit of that kind of storytelling aspect. So the second project is perhaps a little less, you know, kind of directed towards a kind of social structure, but in a way, it does respond a lot to the needs of a city and this idea more than anything of storytelling across the board. So the project is based in San Luis, Missouri. Of course, every time that we talk and think about San Luis, there's always the archway, right? Like, and essentially, believe that that's the city hall. The project is going to be way back in the back. We also, as architects, kind of understand San Luis as an area where architecture has failed, especially public housing. There's a project designed actually by the same architect that designed the Twin Towers, and was built in the 50s, and it was demolished 20 years later. So essentially, like what you see in the city is a lot of like, see, by the way, the archway in the back. You can see that there's a big divide between wealth and those who don't have wealth. But also, more than anything, the idea of the site and the reason why we're doing the project, or we're thinking about doing the project, I'll talk about that a little bit more, is that there is this, what is called the Del Mar divide. This is the neighborhood, the Grand Center neighborhood. And there's a very stark difference between the cultural institutions that are actually in the south and the residents who live at the top. And there's very little cross-pollination between the two communities. And the idea of the project was to build a structure, a platform for these two communities to actually begin to talk to one another. So we did a series of analysis, of course, some zoning to kind of identify opportunities to kind of extend the arts out and to bring essentially the people in, and essentially kind of looking at the different kind of infrastructure and policy that have allowed for this divide to happen and see opportunities within that, mostly to kind of land on one primary site. In this case, is this tree grove that is right outside of 2 museums, one designed by Tadao Ando, by the way. This one here, Pulitzer, and this is the Contemporary Art Museum. So the Grove is actually a quite beautiful space. We had the chance to visit, and is most of the time like this, empty, not people there using it. And the idea is that it is quite a central location. It should become kind of like the focus point for several events that would attract the community. I should preface this by saying that this is a collaboration working with two professors, friends of mine from WashU in San Luis. And the idea, like we actually never met in person to collaborate and to design. The idea more than anything was to figure out a way for us to work together at a distance. And especially when we don't have the same time schedule and everything. So what we came up with is essentially a series of rules that have a series of phases that we all designed, that we kind of, cared about them quite a bit. And more than anything, like they were a series of rules that told us how to assemble them, how to put them together. So these were ways of actually creating volumes, right? Like just by folding the faces that were being used. And what that led to is the growth features. So the pieces that I'm gonna, talk about for this project. So there were several of them that we designed. Specifically here, I show 8 of them, and you can see all the different faces that were used to kind of create them. And more than anything, the importance of them is that they all have a similar kind of formal language. They talk to one another in that sense, but they also have different scales, right? Like some of them are quite large, some are quite small, and similar to the previous presentation by Khurshid, we also kind of generated some stories behind them and what they mean and what they will be used for. So that's part of what I'm going to be presenting for them. So the first one is this kind of a cascading structure. What we call them that mostly because it has the largest amount of scalar differences. So from a single story to kind of double story and kind of growing in space. The idea of it was to become a transition between the museums and the scale of the grow, right? Like the kind of a space in between the canopies. You can imagine the canopies will be right above in this gap. The museum will be on the side, and people can inhabit and kind of walk around these pieces. Some examples of how that process would actually look like. We have the billboard. The billboard is a front-facing piece that would receive all the projections and different types of art that we would use facing the street. This one had a fairly large kind of footprint with large areas to kind of fit, the front of the site. And within the grove itself, given this small space that we had this kind of solo, like small creatures, right? Like, and the idea for these were to become significantly more introspective for a single person to go and walk around them, maybe study or have lunch within one of the pieces, but also to be able to use them as a way to frame views within the grove itself. The last piece was the idea of a strolling creature, essentially the creatures leaving the land, leaving the area and moving over to to engage in different parts of the city. So part of engaging this community required to think about transportation, right? Like how people actually get to the site. So the idea was to get a few of these kind of strolling creatures and place them as bus shelters around the city, and in a way that they also become part of a marketing kind of technique to kind of bring the community closer. They'll recognize the shapes and the forms and essentially kind of use them as such, right? Some shots of those. More than anything, what I do want to talk about in terms of the creatures is that the name itself and the idea was to create a platform through which you can create a series of events. So the idea of encounters with the grove creatures became a very important aspect of the project, essentially thinking about events that lead up to art or that lend themselves quite nicely to, I don't know, Halloween or Christmas or things like big events where essentially people will go and actually activate the site. So the story becomes almost as important as the forms themselves. So as a few kind of closing notes, right? Like in this case, I've moved, kind of through and showing all the kind of buildings that I worked on. But more than anything, my work now is essentially this. There's a certain kind of, I guess, reaction in my case to designing a building that takes several years to actually accomplish. you growing really fond of that building and then having to turn the key to the owner, of course, and then you not being able to access that building ever again, right? Like that is kind of a very sad moment. It takes a very long time, one, to build it. And so the effect and the impact that you can have with a building is several decades, of course. But at the same time, I felt that it was limiting, right? There's a certain scope in which you can work that is a little bit more immediate. And that's what these images are. Media, whether that is through photo montage, through installations, through, kind of very kitschy objects like Lego sets and other things. The idea is to produce something that is easy for everyone to access and to use, with their hands and engage with. So in a way, like the message, if there is one in the lecture, is that you guys are, in fact, engaging in architecture now, and that the kind of beauty of doing so is that you are actually in charge of filling up the image, right? Like the perception of a place. You are active agents in the communities around you, right? And the beauty of architecture is not just to design buildings, but to produce images, right, that allow others to perceive the city. So with that, I'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you.
All right. Osorno and Venckunaite is a designer and educator working at the intersection of architecture, fashion, and material culture. Her practice explores how interdisciplinary strategies, grounded in research and experimentation, can expand the ways we think about and create architecture. She employs unconventional methods and emerging technologies to generate architecture, objects, and immersive environments. Her work has been recognized in both academic and professional contexts. She is a visiting assistant professor at the University of Illinois Chicago, UIC, where she teaches architecture, advanced topic studios, and technology courses. She also lectures in UCLA's summer architecture program and has previously held positions at the Illinois Institute of Technology and the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Osorno earned both her bachelor and master of architecture degrees from UIC. Prior to founding her own practice, she worked at several boutique and corporate firms, gaining experience across a broad range of project types and scales. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Juliet, for a nice introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into talking about the projects. I have a few things to show that I've been working on recently. This is one of them. It's a year-end show event. What is the year-end show event? It's sort of an event at the school that happens at the end of the year where faculty selects best student work, and that student work gets displayed at the show. And this is sort of a nice way to wrap up a year, and students get a bunch of awards, and everyone's super excited. Me and Andrew, who is my colleague, we were asked to kind of design the exhibition and work on the concept and do the space planning. We have a kind of a mid-sized building, and also we had a mid-sized budget for this. And then soon we realized that we don't have a kind of a wall surface to display the work, because some of the projects come in a variety of different sizes. As you can see, some of the boards are extremely large. So then we started designing these big stands. We had 3 options. They were supposed to have wheels, and we should be able to roll them around the space and kind of place them where we needed. However, our fabrication lab was quite busy at the time, and again, it was quite of an expensive kind of way of building the surfaces. So we ended up building the 3 of them and using them for certain things. But then for displaying the boards, we decided to use the existing kind of resources, and we took tables from the studio, and then it took us a few days to figure out the kind of the organization and how to place them together in order to create these wall surfaces. And then once we did that, we covered them in foam core, and then here we had new surfaces to display the projects. So similar thing happened with the pedestals. It seems like a kind of a fun way to display the projects. We decided to use the pedestals to create one big large surface, like a stretched one, the very long. I think it measures probably 20 by 20. So we used the existing pedestals and then covered in the plywood. And then that's how we displayed graduate student projects models. That actually corresponds to the things on the wall, to the boards on the wall. And then here you're looking at the word wall and the X from the graduate level studios. So the word wall was kind of a wrap around the atrium with a French curtain, which also shimmers and kind of creates a really nice effect. So let me play it. That's the video. The curtain itself is layered in multiple colors, so it has this kind of effect of almost movement, emulating water. So symbolically, it represented like waterfall, cascading and then kind of pouring the creative work from the graduate level studios into the gallery. And here you can see the atrium up above. So throughout the day, when the light would change, you would see a variety of different shadows. Here, the curtain is up close. I think it's the nature of the material and the effect itself that it kind of produces. Here you have a few other photos from different angles to see what it looked like. Again, you can see that the color kind of slightly shifts throughout the day. Let me see if I can play this really quickly. There you can see some of the shadows. It's not that obvious in the video, but it's actually really nice when you're in the space. And then during the event, you can see that everyone wants to kind of touch the curtain and be in the space or in the area. Another project that I'm going to talk about is the Western Michigan University. I actually worked on this project in 2019 when I was working with Canon Design. I worked with a kind of a large team. But I'm showing you this project because it got built in 2023, and only in 2025 I went to see it in person, and I was pretty impressed with the result or what it looked like. So when I was working on the project, I was kind of also designing a concept, doing some research and space planning. So these are initial studies. We looked at the Michigan landscape, specifically kind of trees. And wanted to bring some of the ideas of the like kind of being in the forest into the building. So here I'm trying to kind of take the texture of the leaves and emulate the surfaces in the panels. So this is Photoshop kind of processing, and then you have this sort of effect like that translated into the paneling. And again, throughout the day, when the sun changes, you have those patterns kind of translate on the glass, on the building surfaces. Same thing for the interior. The panels from the exterior kind of creates the shading inside, but also produces these beautiful patterns on the different surfaces. This is the cafeteria view where you have panels like the shades on the windows. But then again, you have another layer of pattern happening on the floors and on the tables. So I think like it just adds to the kind of the playfulness of the building environment. And then you have these moments where you have kind of areas where you can lay in the hammock and again experience this kind of a feeling of being in the forest in some way. And also this large stair, like almost kind of sitting by the fire, where it becomes like a heart of the building. And then this is the overall plan of the building. It's a really big project. It has a lot of different programmatic requirements that you have to kind of accurately plan and then position correctly so that you have a nice circulation, that you have good adjacencies. So it takes quite a process to do that. And then this is sort of an ongoing project. It's a research project that I'm working on. I'm interested in these responsive textiles. These are mainly fictional at the moment. It's called Wardrobe of Fictional Materials that imagines architecture as soft and flexible, sort of like clothing or skin instead of rigid walls. And these materials challenge the idea of building being not permanent, always changing, always kind of on a move. This is the sample that you're looking at is the Levis silk. It's a hyperlight membrane harvested from high altitude jet trails, always floating slightly above surfaces. The mode is dreamlike, levitating, and intangible. So I have these 4 categories that I'm working on, and then the next step is to produce digital prototypes. Again, these are fictional and speculative, but in a way, with today's technology, it's almost like kind of close to reality. I'll show you a few as an example, a few more. This is a mirage, which is reflective yet porous surface that mimics nearby architecture and then subtly distorts it as if remembering alternate realities. The mode is surreal, deceptive, and mnemonic. And this is the synth lumen light reactive polymer that shifts hue based on collective emotion in a space tracked via gestures and vocal tone. So some of this interest comes from looking at other architects, artists, and designers, like this one, Soil, with that created this air filtering costume with an artist, Anna Prochke. So again, these costumes are responsive to the environment and to its surroundings, or create green suits that look at variety of different textures like raincoats or like insulation, or just again responsive to the environments. And I'm interested in building these kind of small scale architecture projects, somewhat like garments and somewhat buildings. This is Hare Krishna latex suits. And then this spring, actually, 2025, I was teaching a studio, which is called House Couture. It's sort of a project on its own to design a studio. So my interest is in fashion. I'm looking for new mediums or new ways to design. And I proposed this dance topic studio where students actually look at the garments. I'm not interested them like looking at the actual trends, but what I'm interested actually in the concept behind the fashion, in the concept, the way the garments are being designed, or the form or the structure, the seams and silhouettes, colors and proportions, all these sorts of things. So the students analyze the garments, and then they're asked to produce 3 different prototypes of the houses. So these are the examples of student work. This is Jamie working with sort of movable, operable walls. And these prototypes, I asked students to make them sort of cousins, not brothers and sisters, so that they relate to each other. They're like part of the collection, but not necessarily identical. Once they do that, they look into the interior atmospheres where they kind of observe the spatial conditions. They don't focus on the furniture, just the space itself. And then once they do that, then they focus on designing sort of this environment that also relates to the garment concept and to the garment approach, the way it was composed. So these are some of more examples here. For example, Jasmine was looking at collection that was made out of feathers. So she was interested in very light buildings, kind of operable windows and panels. This is a prototype of the model. Leslie was working with the draping technique. She was looking at Simmons draft collection and sort of exploring the different thicknesses of the materials. Similarly, Daniela was working with like kind of different material thicknesses and textures. And also she was looking into patterns, or here Agalan was working with layering, and Aaron was working with this movable curtain that again was sitting in a kind of a similar simulated environment. Here you have more examples of the student work. I asked them to look into a variety of different ways of kind of a representation, like what are the best like techniques of achieving this kind of a textile quality, whether it's 3D printing and model, whether it's rendering. And then here's the final review. They're showcasing their work. We invite a lot of guests where they give critiques. This is Stuart Hicks. He was my professor when I was in grad school. Now he comes in to review my student work. He's actually a really popular YouTuber. He teaches at UIC. You should look him up. It's Stuart Hicks. He does these really cool videos about architecture. And then this is just a display of all the models and the work. This is another studio that I co-taught with Antonia Torres, where actually they look at real buildings, not fictional, and not fictional. So most of the buildings are located outside of the US, typically in Japan or Switzerland, where they have a little bit like kind of maybe less restrictive building codes. So here you can see some of the samples that students make. It's one-to-one mock-ups. This one is the Recalla building. It actually has a smell because it's made out of rammed earth that is mixed with spices. So here you can see me smelling the different spices and different materials. Some are really good, some are not really great. But then once they design that one-to-one mock-up, they do the larger version of it because there's another process. And then you have another example of glass block. This is the Hermes building. And Uni Ishigami, this is quite a big model. It took a team to build it, and it wasn't really movable. So we were displaying in place, and also they had to dismantle it and to dispose it at the end of semester. Yeah, some of them are insanely heavy. And then again, at the end of the year, we display them in the gallery style, and then we invite critics to review the work. And then this is Dan. Dan was also my technology professor, now comes in. He still teaches at the UIC, but comes in to review the work. And then this is a really kind of a short workshop that I teach incoming graduate students, where they look at the MAD building. They typically focus more on kind of building model building skills, where they produce 3D prints and then also a large scale parts. And then they enter the grad school. Thank you.